It started off like any other Saturday. I was slouched on my dorm bed, halfway through a bag of chips, when Ryan texted me. "Come by around 6. Game's on. Dad's got the good snacks." Ryan and I had been friends since sophomore year. He was easy to be around, the kind of guy who could turn any dull moment into something fun. His dad. I'd only met him twice in passing. One of those cool, sharp-dressed types, probably late 40s, confident, the kind of man who made you sit up straighter without realizing why. I shot back a quick reply. On my way. By the time I threw on a clean hoodie and headed out, the sun was already starting to dip behind the buildings. It was early fall, crisp air, burnt orange skies, and that electric feeling that always comes with big games and cold nights. Halfway there, my phone buzzed. "Ryan. Crap. I gotta run my cousin to the airport. Total emergency. Go without me, Dad's already home. He won't mind." I stopped walking. Just me and his dad? I hovered on the sidewalk for a second, thumb hovering over the keyboard. I could have said I'd come by later, or not at all. But instead I just typed, "Cool. See you after?" Ryan. "Yup, he'll take care of you." The winking emoji didn't help my nerves. I'd never been to Ryan's place alone before. His dad lived in one of those neighborhoods where every lawn looked like it had its own gardener, and the houses had names instead of numbers. I walked up the front steps, heart thumping louder than I expected. The door opened before I could even knock. "Hey," his dad said, leaning against the doorframe, with a casual kind of confidence that made my hoodie feel suddenly underdressed. "You must be here for the game." "Yeah," I said, scratching the back of my neck. "Ryan said I could still come?" He told me. He stepped aside to let me in. "I'm Mark, and you're—" "Josh," I said quickly. "Right." "Josh, come on in." The place smelled like cedar and whatever cologne he was wearing, expensive and understated. The living room had one of those oversized sectionals and a wall-mounted TV that took up nearly the whole wall. Everything was tidy but lived in, masculine, warm. No sign of a woman's touch. I wondered briefly if Ryan's mom was in the picture anymore, but didn't ask. Mark motioned to the couch. "Beer?" I hesitated. Sure." He returned a moment later with 2 craft beers, not the cheap stuff I was used to. He cracked one open and handed it to me, then sat down at the opposite end of the couch, legs crossed, totally at ease, like this wasn't weird at all. "You into college ball?" he asked, nodding at the pre-game show on screen. "Big time," I said, thankful for neutral ground. We started chatting about teams, predictions, dumb plays from last season. His voice was deep, calm, but sharp, like he didn't waste words. I noticed the way he leaned in when I talked, made eye contact that didn't waver. There was something about him that held your attention without trying. Still, I couldn't help feeling the edges of the moment, a weird tension I couldn't name. Not bad, just unusual. Like I'd walked into a scene I didn't totally understand. When the first whistle blew and the game started, Mark grinned. "Let's see if your team holds up. You picked the wrong house to root against us." I laughed. "I can handle a little pressure." His eyes flicked to mine. "I bet you can," and just like that, I wasn't sure if we were still talking about football. Mark leaned back against the sectional like he owned the world. Not in an arrogant way, just confident, like a man who knew exactly who he was and didn't have anything to prove. The game lit up the room with quick flashes of motion and color, but I was more aware of the space between us. It wasn't much. One big couch, 2 people. Just me and him. He reached for the snack tray between us and offered it. "Chips? Or are you one of those protein bar guys?" I laughed, grabbing a handful. "Only when I'm pretending to be disciplined." "Pretending," he repeated with a grin. "You don't need to pretend much, you've got a solid build." I blinked. It wasn't what he said. It was how, like it was casual, a passing comment. But his eyes lingered half a second longer than necessary. "Thanks," I said, trying to sound unfazed. "I play pickup a lot. Gym on weekends." Mark took a slow sip of his beer. "Shows." The silence after that wasn't awkward, it was full. Like a string pulled tight but not snapped. I turned back to the game, trying to let the tension ease. Ryan never mentioned you were into sports, he said after a beat. He doesn't really pay attention to the stuff I like, I said, more honest than I meant to be. We hang out, but we're pretty different, Mark nodded. Yeah, I got that impression. He's more into his own world. He reached for the remote and turned the volume down a notch. Not off, just enough so our voices didn't have to compete. You're the thoughtful kid, he said. You listen more than you talk. That's rare. I raised an eyebrow. You get all that from 10 minutes of conversation? I'm observant, he said with a smirk, and you're not hard to read. I took another sip of beer, my throat suddenly dry. So what else do you read? He looked at me directly. That you're used to fading into the background. But you shouldn't. You've got presence, Josh. That name, my name, sounded different coming from him. Sharper. Clearer? I looked down at the bottle in my hand. You really don't hold back, do you? Life's short, he said. Say what you mean when you mean it. It was quiet for a while after that, just the low hum of the game and the occasional cheer from the commentators. I felt him shift beside me. His leg brushed mine lightly. Not a jolt, not obvious. Just contact. Warm. I didn't move. He didn't either. I'm glad you came, he said finally. I almost didn't, I admitted. Felt weird showing up without Ryan. Ryan wouldn't have cared, he said. Then more deliberately. Neither did I. There was something about the way he said that. I turned to look at him, and for a second neither of us said anything. He reached for the chip bowl again, his hand grazing mine this time. Not hard. Just enough. You nervous? He asked, eyes still on the screen. A little. Don't. I wanted to ask why not, but the word stuck, because part of me already knew. Mark stood up to grab another round of drinks. I watched him walk to the kitchen, broad shoulders, relaxed confidence, like he belonged in every room he entered. When he came back, he handed me another beer and sat closer than before. Not touching, but closer. He tapped the bottle against mine. 2 surprises. 2 surprises, I echoed, voice barely above a whisper. We drank. The third quarter started. A bad call on the field sent Mark into a brief rant, and I laughed harder than I meant to. You've got a great laugh, he said casually. You should use it more. I turned toward him, and for a second he looked at me. Not just at me, but into me. I felt exposed and seen all at once. Do you always flirt like this during football games? I asked, trying to lighten the mood. He smirked. Only when I liked the company, the room felt warmer. Or maybe it was just me. Halftime rolled in with a chorus of loud commercials and sports commentators who wouldn't shut up. Mark muted the TV and stretched, his arm brushing mine in that same casual, deliberate way that felt less and less accidental. Snack. Refill? He asked, already standing. Sure, I said, grabbing our empty bowls and following him into the kitchen. The kitchen was all stainless steel and dark wood, modern, stylish, like something from a design magazine. But there were homey touches, too. A photo of Ryan as a kid taped to the fridge, a worn dish towel that looked out of place in such a sleek space. Mark opened a cabinet and pulled out a new bag of chips, then leaned against the counter, tearing. Open with one hand. He nodded toward the photo. That was taken the summer after the divorce, just the two of us back then. Me trying to figure out how to be both parents without screwing him up. I leaned against the island, surprised by how suddenly the conversation had shifted. He turned out all right, I offered. Yeah, Mark said, pouring the chips into a fresh bowl. Still, I missed a lot. Work got in the way, grief too. You don't realize how lonely a big house can feel until it's quiet at night and there's no one to ask how your day went. I didn't know what to say to that. The honesty in his voice caught me off guard. He looked down at the bowl for a second, then chuckled softly. Sorry, he said. Didn't mean to drop that on you like some therapy session. It's okay, I said. I get it. He looked up. Do you? I nodded. Yeah, my parents aren't divorced or anything, but I don't know. I've always been the quiet one, the background friend, the +1 to people like Ryan. Mark's eyes held mine. You don't seem like a background anything. I let out a soft laugh. You don't know me that well. Maybe, he said, but I've been watching people for a long time. And you're more confident than you realize. I felt heat crawl up my neck, not from embarrassment exactly, but from the weight of being seen. Really seen. Not for who I pretended to be, but for who I might be if I stopped holding back. We stood there for a moment, neither of us speaking. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. Outside, a car passed by with music playing faintly through the open window. But in the kitchen, time stretched thin and still. Mark took a slow step forward and set the bowl down beside me. Close. Too close. You don't let people in easily, do you? He asked, his voice lower now. I swallowed. Not really. Most people don't notice, I noticed. That silence again, full, thick with everything we weren't saying. His hand brushed the counter near mine, not touching but inviting. Waiting. I didn't move. I couldn't. I think people underestimate you, he said. Maybe, I whispered. His eyes flicked to my lips and back. I could feel the air between us tighten, like a rubber band pulled too far. Any second now, something would give. But it didn't. Instead, he pulled back gently, picked up the bowl, and turned away. Come on, he said with a soft smile. Let's not miss the second half. And just like that, the moment folded in on itself. Not gone, just tucked away. A spark left smoldering under the surface. As I followed him back to the living room, I realized I was walking into something I couldn't define, something unspoken. And the strangest part, I didn't want to define it. By the time we returned to the living room, something between us had changed. The air felt heavier, but not in a bad way, more like charged, electric. We didn't mention what had just happened in the kitchen. We didn't need to. It was there, sitting quietly between us like a third presence. Mark sat down first, this time a little closer than before. Not obvious, just a small shift, a difference you wouldn't notice unless you were paying attention. And I was. He picked up the remote, unmuted the TV, and tossed it onto the cushion between us. His arm rested casually along the back of the couch, his knee brushing mine as he adjusted his position. I didn't move away. Your team's getting crushed, he said, smirking. I'm loyal, not delusional, I said with a grin. Loyalty's good, he replied, his tone slower now. Rare. The game played on, but we barely watched. We made small talk, threw jabs at the score, but the space between us felt like it was closing with every passing minute. At one point, I made a sarcastic comment about one of the players tripping over his own feet, and Mark laughed, really laughed. A warm, deep sound. He looked at me for a long second, then shook his head. You've changed a lot, he said. I raised an eyebrow. Changed? He nodded. From the quiet kid who used to tag along with Ryan, you've grown into someone, really magnetic. The word hit harder than I expected. Magnetic, I tried to play it off. That's a pretty big compliment. He leaned in a little. It's not a compliment, it's an observation. My mouth went dry. There was nothing aggressive about his tone. It wasn't pushy, just honest, unapologetic. He was saying something real and giving me space to decide what to do with it. I shifted in my seat, heart pounding louder than the game's commentary. I could feel the warmth of his leg against mine. His hand was still draped behind me, fingers resting on the edge of the cushion just inches from my shoulder. Is this normal for you? I asked, voice low. What? Watching the game? He said with a half smile. Flirting with someone half your age? He tilted his head slightly, eyes never leaving mine. Is that what you think this is? I don't know what this is. I think you do, he said. Then, after a pause, tell me to stop if this is too much. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Instead, I looked at him, really looked. The crease near his mouth, the faint shadow of stubble. The way his eyes were so calm while mine were trying to make sense of everything. And in that stillness, something broke through the noise. He leaned in slowly, giving me every second to pull away. I didn't. His lips brushed mine. Soft. Tentative. Testing. It wasn't hungry or wild. It was quiet. Careful. Like he was offering something, not taking it, but it was real, and it sent something through me I wasn't ready for. My breath caught. My hand, without thinking, had found the edge of his shirt. Just fingertips, just touch. But that was enough to snap me back. I pulled away. Not sharply, not with fear. Just with the weight of everything hitting me at once. I should go, I whispered. Mark didn't flinch. Didn't look offended or surprised. He just watched me, eyes steady, voice calm. You can, he said. Or you can stay and we just talk. His voice was so gentle. Not pleading, just offering. The TV was still playing, but I didn't hear it anymore. All I heard was the rush in my ears and the sound of my own breath. I sat there, frozen. For a second, torn between the door and the warmth beside me. I looked at him again. His face was soft, open, no pressure. I nodded slowly. I'll stay. For a little while. He nodded back, as if that answer was enough. For now. And we didn't talk for a moment. We just sat there, the space between us full of everything we didn't say. Yet I woke up to the softest kind of light. Early morning sunlight filtering through linen curtains, pale and gold. The guest bedroom was quiet. Still. The kind of quiet that felt earned. The events of the night before hovered at the edge of my memory, like smoke that hadn't quite cleared. We hadn't kissed again. We hadn't touched beyond that one small, significant moment. After I said I'd stay, we talked. Not about what happened, just about life. About music, movies, his worst first date, my most embarrassing childhood memory. We'd laughed until we were breathless. Somewhere around midnight, Mark had stood stretched and said, "You take the guest room. You'll be more comfortable there." He didn't offer to stay. Didn't ask me to come with him. Just placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "Sleep well, Josh." It was the gentlest boundary I hadn't realized I needed. Now, lying on his impossibly soft guest bed, wrapped in clean sheets and last night's conversation, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Safe, seen. I sat up, ran a hand through my hair, and glanced at the clock on the nightstand. Just after 7:30. The house was quiet, but I caught the faint sound of something clinking. Maybe a pan, maybe a plate. The smell of coffee drifted in. When I made my way down the hall, Mark was already in the kitchen, standing barefoot in sweats. And a navy tea. He looked different. Softer somehow. Not like a man who had kissed me the night before. More like someone who'd let me in and was now giving me space to decide if I'd return. "Morning," he said without turning around. "Coffee's hot. Mugs are above the sink." "Thanks," I said, voice still scratchy from sleep. He handed me a plate with 2 slices of toast and a fried egg. "Don't get excited. I'm a simple breakfast guy." "It's perfect," I said, and meant it. We sat at the counter, eating quietly for a few minutes. The sunlight made the kitchen feel warmer than last night, more real. Like something ordinary could still be special. He was the one who broke the silence. "You sleep okay?" I nodded. "Yeah, better than I expected." "Good." He sipped his coffee and looked out the window. "I wasn't sure if you'd still be here." "Me neither," I said honestly. A pause. Then, "I'm glad you stayed." I glanced over at him. "So am I." There was no tension. No pressure. Just 2 people existing in the same space, letting the quiet say what words couldn't. We didn't rehash the kiss. He didn't ask me what it meant. I didn't ask him what came next, and somehow that felt like the most respectful thing either of us could do. He washed his plate. I washed mine. We moved around each other in that easy domestic rhythm that usually takes months to form. When I grabbed my hoodie and stepped toward the front door, he followed me there. I turned to him, unsure what to say. Goodbye felt too final. See you soon felt too certain he beat me to it. If you ever need to talk, he said. Or not talk, I'm here. I looked up. His eyes weren't searching. They were steady, warm. Okay, I said quietly. He didn't hug me, didn't reach for my hand. Just opened the door and let the morning air wrap around us. As I stepped out onto the porch, I realized we hadn't labeled what happened, hadn't boxed it into something neat or defined. We'd just let it be, and that strangely was enough. It had been 3 days. 3 days since I left Mark's house with a head full of noise and a heart I couldn't quite read. I hadn't told anyone, not Ryan, not my roommate, not even myself, in any complete sentence, what had happened. And maybe that was the strangest part. Nothing really happened. No fireworks, no declarations. Just one kiss, one choice to stay. One night of conversation that somehow shifted the ground beneath me. But the silence that followed, that said everything. I kept replaying it, lying in my bed at night, the hum of my ceiling fan barely cutting through the static in my head. His voice echoing in fragments. You're more confident than you realize. If you ever need to talk, or not talk. The way he looked at me, not with expectation but with understanding. And the kiss, God, the kiss. It wasn't about attraction. Or maybe it was, but not just that. It was about being seen. About someone choosing to pause the world for 1 second and show me, I see you. I respect you. I want to know what happens next. And that, more than anything, had haunted me in the best and worst way. I kept checking my phone without meaning to. Every time a notification lit up the screen, my stomach jumped. Nothing from him. Until this morning. I was making coffee in my tiny apartment kitchen, trying to focus on school emails and laundry I'd been avoiding, when the screen buzzed. 1. New message, Mark still thinking about that game. That was it, No emoji, no follow-up, just that. I stared at the message for a long time, thumb hovering over the screen. He wasn't asking for anything, wasn't pushing. It was just an opening. A door left ajar, not swung wide open. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I reread it 5 times, smiling before I even realized I was. Because, yeah, I was still thinking about that game. About the moment halftime became something else. About how sometimes a living room and a bowl of chips could turn into something bigger, quieter, but bigger. I didn't know what came next. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. Maybe this was a chapter that would close softly, without pain, without noise. Or maybe it was the first line of something slow and real and undefined. Something we would keep building in the pauses, in the messages, that didn't demand answers. I walked to the window and opened it, letting the breeze in. The city outside moved like it always did. Cars passing, voices in the distance, life happening all around me. But inside it felt still, peaceful, like I could finally breathe again. My phone buzzed again, same message, still unread, still there. I finally typed 2 words, still playing. Then I hit send. I didn't know what he'd say, or if he would. But it didn't matter, not really. Because something had shifted, and whether we ever talked about it again or not, I'd carry that moment with me. The quiet kitchen, the laughter, that kiss like a question neither of us needed to answer right. Sometimes the moments we don't talk about are the ones that matter most.